The galaxy had rules. Rules older than most civilizations could remember. The first rule was simple: never go too far from home. The second rule was even simpler: fear the dark. For millions of years, thousands of alien species had followed these rules without question. They built their homes around their stars. They created safe zones where ships could travel. Beyond those zones, there was only the void, the endless, terrible dark that swallowed ships and drove crews insane. Every child in every civilization learned the same stories. Stories of explorers who went too far and never came back. Stories of the endless dark that waited between the stars. The Galactic Council ruled over this careful order. They were the oldest species, the wisest ones who had survived by being cautious. They marked the safe routes. They enforced the boundaries. And most importantly, they made sure everyone remembered to be afraid. Commander Taeyang stood on the bridge of his Vrethian patrol ship, watching the sensor screens with 3 of his eyes. His species had 6 eyes total, which made them excellent guards. They could see in multiple directions at once. Right now, all 6 eyes were focused on something that should not exist. "Commander," his sensor officer clicked in their language. "The object is still there. It has not disappeared." "That is impossible," Taeyang said. "Nothing moves that fast through deep space. Nothing survives in that region." "Check the sensors again." The officer checked, then checked again. "The readings are correct, Commander. There is a small vessel. It is moving at speeds we have never recorded, and it is broadcasting signals." Taeyang felt his skin change color, which happened when Vrethians were confused. "What kind of signals?" "Strange ones. Mathematical patterns, images, and sounds that might be language or music. We cannot tell which." This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. That region of space was a dead zone. Ships that entered it never returned. Yet here was a vessel, moving through it like it was a safe highway, sending out signals like it wanted to be found. "Prepare to intercept," Taeyang ordered. "But keep weapons ready. This could be a trap." The patrol ship moved closer. As they approached, they could finally see the vessel clearly. It was small, much smaller than any ship that could travel through deep space. Its design was strange, with smooth curves and panels that seemed to collect light from distant stars. On its side were markings in a script no one recognized. "Open communication channels," Taeyang said. "All frequencies." For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through. It spoke in a language the ship's computer had never heard before, but the tone was clear. It sounded friendly, almost excited. The computer worked quickly to translate. "Greetings," the voice said. "This is Captain Minho of the Earth vessel Taeguk Pioneer. We come in peace. We are explorers from the planet Earth. We mean no harm. We are happy to meet you." Taeyang's skin flashed 3 different colors at once. Earth, he had never heard of such a place. And explorers? Who explored for fun? "This is Commander Taeyang of the Vrethian Empire," he responded carefully. "You are in violation of galactic boundaries. You have entered a forbidden zone. By law, we must escort you to the nearest council station." There was a pause. Then the voice called Minho spoke again, and his tone was curious rather than afraid. "Forbidden? We did not know. We saw this region was empty on our map, so we thought it would be interesting to explore. Is there danger here we should know about?" "Is there danger?" Taeyang could not believe what he was hearing. This species, these humans, had traveled through one of the most feared regions in the galaxy and were asking if there was danger, as if they had not noticed the crushing darkness, as if they had not felt the terror that every sane species felt in the void. "You will follow us," Taeyang said firmly. "We will explain everything at the station." The human ship agreed without argument. As they traveled back to the station, Taeyang watched the small vessel carefully. Its crew sent out more signals, more music, more images. They showed pictures of their homeworld, a blue and green planet with white clouds. They showed images of their species, which looked fragile and soft. 2 eyes, no natural armor, no claws or fangs. How had such a weak species built a ship that could travel through deep space? At the station, Taeyang met the human crew face to face. There were 5 of them. Captain Minho was tall for his species, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. He smiled when he saw Taeyang, which the Vrethian found disturbing. Smiling at a first contact situation meant either stupidity or fearlessness. Both were dangerous. With Minho were 4 others. Yuna was a scientist who immediately asked questions about Vrethian biology. Daehyun was a diplomat who spoke in calm, measured tones. Minji was an engineer who studied every piece of technology she could see. And Jiwan was a young pilot who looked around the station with obvious wonder. The interrogation should have been simple. The council had procedures for first contact. Ask questions. Establish threat level. Determine what to do with the newcomers. But the humans made everything complicated because they had no fear. Why did you enter the forbidden zone? The council investigator asked. We did not know it was forbidden, Minho answered. Our sensors showed it was empty space. We wanted to see what was there. Were you not afraid? Minho looked confused. Afraid of what? It was just space. Dark space, yes, but we have navigation lights. The investigator leaned forward. Your species is not afraid of the dark? Now all 5 humans looked confused. Yuna spoke up. The dark? No, why would we be afraid of darkness? Our planet rotates. Half the time we live in darkness. We call it night. It is normal. The room went silent. Every alien present felt a chill. A species that lived in darkness. A species that thought darkness was normal. The investigator's hands shook as he made notes. Over the following days, the humans answered every question. They explained how their planet had a day and night cycle. They showed images of their cities which glowed with artificial lights when darkness came. They talked about their history of exploring caves, deep oceans, and the space between their planet and moon. They spoke of darkness like it was an old friend, not an ancient enemy. The council convened an emergency session. They debated for hours. Some wanted to send the humans home immediately. Others wanted to study them. A few suggested that humanity might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Elder Vix, who had lived for 10,000 years and seen civilizations rise and fall, made the final decision. Let them stay, he said, but watch them closely. A species without fear is either the galaxy's salvation or its doom. We must discover which. And so humanity took its first steps into a galaxy that had lived in darkness and fear for millions of years. They did not know it yet, but they carried something precious, something the galaxy had lost long ago. They carried light. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for it. 6 months had passed since the Teguk pioneer arrived in galactic space. In that time, Earth had sent more ships. Not warships or invasion fleets, but diplomatic vessels filled with scientists, ambassadors, and gifts. The gifts were what troubled the Galactic Council most. Ambassador Daehyun stood before the full council assembly. Behind him, a massive screen displayed Earth's night sky. Stars scattered across darkness like diamonds on black silk. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. To them, the image looked like a nightmare. To humans, it was beautiful. Honored Council, Daehyun said, his voice calm and respectful. Earth wishes to share what we have learned in our history. We understand that many species here have difficulty with deep space travel. We believe we can help. Council Speaker Vrenthos, a being made of crystalline structures that rang like bells when he moved, spoke carefully. Ambassador, your offer is generous, but we must understand what you propose. Please explain these gifts. Daehyun gestured, and the screen changed. It showed detailed maps of star systems, routes through previously unexplored regions, and data from human exploration missions. First, we offer our navigation data. In our 6 months of travel before we met Commander Taeyang, we mapped over 300 systems. Many are in regions your species consider too dangerous to explore. Murmurs spread through the chamber. 300 systems in 6 months? Most species spent decades working up courage to explore one new system. Second, Daehyun continued, we offer our lighting technology. The screen showed human cities at night, blazing with artificial light. We have spent thousands of years developing ways to create light, not just small lights, but powerful ones that can illuminate large areas. We believe this technology could help with space travel. Elder Vic, sitting in the highest seat, raised one glowing appendage. You propose to light up space itself? Yes, Elder, Daehyun said. With your permission, Dr. Minji from Earth would like to demonstrate. Minji stepped forward. She was younger than Daehyun, with quick movements and excited energy that made several council members nervous. She carried a small device that looked harmless but made the guards tense. This is a prototype beacon, Minji explained, holding it up. It is small, but it shows what we can build. With permission, I would like to activate it in the outer sector, in the region you call the Gray Zone. The council chamber erupted. The Gray Zone was a dead area where ships vanished. No one had successfully crossed it in recorded history. The idea of putting anything there, especially something that produced light, was insane. Captain Sun Ho of the Kryn Dominion stood up. His species looked like armored reptiles built for war. His voice was harsh. This is foolishness. The human speaks of bringing light to the darkness as if it is a gift, but light attracts attention. Light reveals what should stay hidden. I say we refuse this dangerous proposal. Other voices joined his, but some disagreed. The Helixian representative, a flowing being of liquid metal, spoke in support. Perhaps we have been too cautious. Perhaps the humans see something we have forgotten how to see. The debate lasted for hours. Finally, Elder Vix made a decision. We will allow a small test. Dr. Minji may activate one beacon in the Gray Zone, but only one, and we will observe from a safe distance. 3 days later, a fleet of ships gathered at the edge of the Gray Zone, human vessels mixed with alien ones. On the command ship, Minji prepared the beacon with help from Jiwan, the young pilot from the Taeguk Pioneer. They worked together to program the device. Are you scared? Jiwan asked Minji as they worked. Minji smiled. A little, but more excited than scared. We are going to light up a place that has been dark for millions of years. That is amazing. Jiwan laughed. The aliens think we are crazy. Maybe we are, Minji said. But crazy is how progress happens. They loaded the beacon onto a small drone. The drone flew into the Gray Zone, moving deeper into the darkness. The fleet watched on their sensors. When the drone reached the center of the zone, Minji activated the beacon. Light blazed across space. Not weak light, but brilliant illumination that pushed back the darkness for thousands of kilometers. For the first time in galactic history, the Gray Zone was visible. And what they saw changed everything. Dozens of ships floated in the newly lit space. Old ships from species long extinct, lost exploration vessels that had vanished centuries ago, and ruins, ancient structures that someone had built and then abandoned. The Gray Zone was not empty. It had never been empty. It was a graveyard that darkness had hidden. Captain Minho, now promoted to Commodore, led the exploration team. They moved through the lit zone carefully, scanning everything. Yuna examined the old ships, finding logs and data that told stories of civilizations that had tried to explore too far. Not because they were brave, but because they were desperate. Look at this, Yuna said, sharing data with the fleet. These species were running from something. They tried to cross the Gray Zone to escape, but they failed because they could not navigate in the dark. The discovery should have been celebrated. They had found lost history. They had proven that light could make the impossible possible. But then the sensors detected something else. Something was moving in response to the light. Something massive. Commander Taiyang, now working alongside the human fleet, saw it first on his screens. What is that? The readings made no sense. It was huge, larger than any ship or station. It was not solid, but it was there, and it was moving toward the beacon. Elder Vix's voice came through the communication system. His tone was urgent. Shut down the beacon now, shut it down immediately. But before Minji could send the command, the thing reached the beacon. It was not a ship. It was not a creature they could understand. It looked like darkness itself had taken form, a void in the shape of something alive. The fleet scattered, but the void did not attack. It circled the beacon. It seemed curious rather than angry. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it moved away, vanishing back into the depths of space. The fleet returned to council space in silence. Back in the chamber, Elder Vix finally explained what everyone had seen. They are called Void Devourers, he said. They are old, older than any civilization. Millions of years ago, when species first began exploring space, the Devourers appeared. They consumed entire civilizations that spread too far, too fast. That is why we stay close to home. That is why we fear the dark. The darkness protects us from them. Daehyun listened carefully, then asked, "But the devourer did not attack us. It just looked at the beacon and left." "This time," Sunho said angrily, "but you woke it up. You brought light to space that should have stayed dark. You have put the entire galaxy at risk." Minho stepped forward. "With respect, Captain Sunho, we did not know, but now we do. And I propose we learn more. That devourer was curious about the light. It did not attack. Maybe there is a way to coexist with these beings." "Coexist?" Sunho's voice was full of disbelief. "You want to coexist with forces that destroyed entire civilizations?" "Yes," Minho said simply. "Because hiding in fear is not living. And if humanity has learned anything, it is that most monsters become less scary when you turn on the light." The council was divided. Some saw humans as dangerous fools who would doom them all. Others saw hope that perhaps the old fears could be overcome. Elder Vix sat in silence, thinking about what he had seen. Finally, he spoke. "The beacon will remain active. We will study this devourer. We will learn if humanity's light is a gift or a curse. And if it is a curse, we will know before it is too late." But late at night, when the council chamber was empty, Vix looked at the data from the gray zone. He saw how the devourer had moved, how it had circled the light, and for the first time in his 10,000 years of life, he wondered if perhaps they had been wrong about the darkness all along. Jiwon could not sleep. The image of the void devourer kept playing in her mind. The way it had moved, the way it had seemed almost gentle when it approached the beacon. Everyone else saw a monster. She saw something different. She saw a creature that had been alone in the dark for millions of years, finally seeing light. Against regulations, against common sense, and against direct orders from her superiors, Jiwon made a decision. She took a small shuttle from the human fleet docks. She loaded it with one of the new beacon prototypes, and she flew toward the outer rim, to a region even darker than the gray zone. She left a message for Minho. "I am sorry, Commodore, but I need to know. I need to understand. If I caused harm by activating the first beacon, I need to make it right." By the time anyone discovered she was gone, Jiwon was already deep in the dark zone. She activated the beacon. Light flooded outward, illuminating space that had been black since the galaxy formed, and almost immediately she got a response. Not one void devourer came. 3 of them appeared. They were massive, each one large enough to swallow a moon. They circled her tiny shuttle, moving in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. Jiwon watched them through her window, her heart beating fast but not from fear. From wonder. "Hello," she said, even though she knew they could not understand. "I brought light for you. I thought you might be lonely out here." The devourers did not attack. They moved closer, studying her ship with what seemed like curiosity. Then something happened that changed everything. One of them touched her ship. Not violently, but gently, and through that touch Jiwon felt something. Not words, but emotions, feelings, loneliness, curiosity, and something else. Hunger. Back at Council Space, alarms were screaming. Minho stood on the bridge of his ship reading Jiwon's message. His face was calm, but his hands gripped the console hard. "Get me every ship we have," he ordered. "Human and alien. We need to reach her before those things decide she is food." Taeyang, now permanently assigned to work with the human fleet, checked his sensors. "Commodore Minho, we are detecting 3 void devourers at her location. This is the largest gathering we have ever recorded. If we approach, we might trigger them to attack. Then we will have to be very careful," Minho said. "But we are not leaving her alone out there." A fleet of 40 ships raced toward the outer rim. Humans, Vrethians, Helixians, and even some Kryn vessels under Captain Sunho's command. As they approached, they expected to find wreckage. Instead, they found something impossible. Jiwon's shuttle was intact. The 3 devourers were still there, circling the beacon. And on the communication channel, Jiwon was transmitting data. "They are not monsters," her voice came through. "They are hungry, yes, but not for ships or people. They feed on energy, and for millions of years, the only energy in deep space was from expanding civilizations. They are like, I do not know, like space whales. They follow where the energy is." Minho ordered the fleet to stop at a safe distance. "Jiwon, can you return to the fleet?" "I can try," she said. "But I think they want the beacon. They like it. It gives them energy without hurting anyone. Yuna, listening from the science vessel, understood immediately. They are not attacking civilizations because they are evil. They are eating the energy that civilizations produce. Stars produce energy too, but apparently not the right kind. Our expansion, our machines, our lights, we are like food to them. Elder Vix's voice came through the fleet communication. Then we were right to stay small. Right to stay hidden. If we spread, we attract them. No, Minji said, her mind working fast. We were wrong about how to handle them. We have been running and hiding. But what if we feed them instead? What if we give them beacons? Energy sources they can feed on without needing to consume civilizations. The idea was radical. Instead of fearing the devourers, cooperate with them. Give them what they needed so they would leave everyone alone. But it required trust, and the galaxy had forgotten how to trust. Captain Sunho's voice was harsh. You ask us to feed the monsters that destroyed our ancestors? This is madness, is it? Minho asked. Or is it survival? We have two choices. Keep hiding in our small corners of space forever, or learn to coexist with the galaxy as it actually is. Before anyone could debate further, the situation changed. The devourers suddenly shifted their movements. They were no longer circling peacefully. They were converging on something. On Jiwon's shuttle, they are attacking, Taeyang shouted, but Jiwon's voice remained calm. No, they are communicating. I can feel it. They want to show me something. One of the devourers touched her shuttle again. This time the touch lasted longer. And through the ship's sensors, everyone in the fleet saw what Jiwon was seeing. Images, memories, not in words or pictures, but in pure feeling. They saw the ancient past. They saw the first civilizations rising, spreading, consuming resources without thought. They saw the devourers appearing, not as attackers, but as part of the galaxy's natural balance. When species took too much, the devourers corrected the balance. They were not evil. They were simply doing what they had always done. But then they saw something else. They saw loneliness. Millions of years of emptiness as species learned to hide from them. The devourers were intelligent. They could think and feel. And they had been alone in the dark for so long that they had forgotten anything else existed. The images faded. The devourer released Jiwon's shuttle. All three creatures moved back to the beacon, circling it like moths around a flame. They were staying. They wanted to stay. Jiwon activated her shuttle and flew back to the fleet. When she docked, Minho was waiting. He looked like he wanted to be angry, but he was too relieved to manage it. That was incredibly stupid, he said. Yes, sir, Jiwon agreed. And incredibly brave. Thank you, sir. Yuna pushed past them both, scanner in hand. I need to examine you. That level of contact with a void devourer could have effects we do not understand. As Yuna ran tests, Minji was already designing new beacons. Bigger ones. More powerful ones. Beacons that could feed devourers without needing to draw power from inhabited systems. She shared her plans with the fleet. We can place these at intervals throughout deep space, she explained. Create a network. The devourers can feed on them, and in exchange they leave our civilizations alone. Maybe they can even help us. They travel through space faster than anything we have ever built. Maybe they can teach us. Elder Vix listened to all of this from his chamber in council space. He was old, so old that he remembered when his own species first encountered the devourers. They had lost 3 colony worlds before they learned to stop expanding. The pain of that loss had shaped galactic policy for millions of years, but he had also seen Jiwon's data. He had felt what she felt, and he realized something profound. His species had been so focused on the pain of the past that they had never considered there might be another way forward. Approve the beacon network, he announced to the council, but we will do it carefully. We will test each beacon, and we will study these devourers. If humanity is right, we may have been prisoners of our own fear for millions of years. If they are wrong, we will know quickly enough, Sunho objected. Elder, this is too dangerous. We should vote. We already voted, Vic said quietly. Millions of years ago when we chose fear over understanding. Now we will try something different. We will choose light. 3 months later, the first network of beacons was complete. 10 stations placed throughout the dark zones. Devourers came to each one feeding peacefully. Not a single ship was attacked. Not a single civilization was threatened. The galaxy watched in amazement as the creatures they had feared for millions of years became guardians of the light instead of hunters in the dark. Jiwon became a hero. though she insisted she had just been curious. And humanity proved once again that sometimes the best way to defeat a monster was to try to understand it first. 1 year after first contact, the galaxy looked different. Beacon stations glowed throughout space that had been dark for millions of years. Ships traveled routes that were once considered impossible. Species that had never met before were now trading partners. And at the center of it all was humanity. Still curious, still fearless, still lighting up the dark. Ambassador Daehyun stood in the new Galactic Cooperation Center, a station built by combined efforts of 20 species. It floated at the edge of what used to be called the Gray Zone. Now it was called the Gateway Region. The change in name reflected the change in thinking. The Lighthouse Initiative is ahead of schedule, Daehyun reported to the assembled representatives. We now have 300 beacon stations operational. Trade routes have increased by 400%. Contact between species has tripled. And most importantly, not a single ship has been lost to a Void Devourer incident. Representative Kelix of the Helixian Collective, their liquid metal body flowing in patterns of happiness, spoke with enthusiasm. My species has explored more in this past year than in our previous 1,000 years of history. We have found 6 habitable worlds we never knew existed, all thanks to humanity's light. But not everyone was celebrating. Captain Sunho sat in the back of the chamber, his armored face showing doubt. After the meeting, he approached Daehyun privately. Ambassador, I need to speak with you, Sunho said. Somewhere private. They went to an observation deck. Through the windows, they could see a beacon station glowing in the distance. A Void Devourer circled it peacefully, feeding on its energy. What troubles you, Captain? Daehyun asked. Sunho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My species, the Kryn, we are warriors. We pride ourselves on courage. But watching your people, I realize we never had true courage at all. We were brave in battle, yes, but we were terrified of the unknown. We built weapons to fight enemies we could see, but we ran from the darkness. You are being too hard on yourself, Daehyun said gently. No, Sunho continued. I am being honest. Do you know what the worst part is? I am still afraid. I watch your people walk through dark corridors without lights and laugh about it. I watch Jiwon fly into unknown space like it is a game, and I am terrified. Not of what might hurt me, but of how small I feel. How limited, Daehyun nodded slowly. Fear does not make you weak, Captain. Fear kept your species alive for millions of years. What matters is what you do with that fear. You can let it chain you, or you can learn to carry it with you while you move forward. How? Sunho asked. How do your people do it? Practice, Daehyun said. And friends who will not let you face the dark alone. Across the station, Commodore Minho was dealing with a different kind of problem. His fleet had been assigned to explore the galactic core, a region so dangerous that no expedition had ever returned from it. The mission would take them further than any species had traveled in recorded history. His crew gathered in the briefing room. Yuna, Minji, and Jiwon were there, along with Taeyang and a dozen other officers from various species. On the display screen was a map showing their planned route. I will not lie to you, Minho said. This mission is dangerous. We will be the first to attempt a complete crossing to the core. We might fail. We might not come back. Anyone who wants to withdraw can do so now with no shame. No one moved, not even Taeyang, who 6 months ago would have refused such a mission as suicide. Good, Minho said with a smile. Then let us make history. The fleet departed 3 days later. 20 ships crewed by over 500 individuals from 15 species. As they flew deeper into space, the beacons lit their way. But eventually they would pass the last beacon and enter truly unknown territory. On the journey, something unexpected happened. The crew members began to change. The alien crew members started acting more like humans. They told jokes during dangerous maneuvers. They played games during rest periods. They started to see the dark not as an enemy, but as a canvas waiting to be filled with light. Taeyang noticed it first in himself. He was walking through a maintenance corridor when the lights failed. 2 months ago, he would have panicked. Now he simply activated his helmet light and continued walking. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a victory. Commander Taeyang, a voice said from behind him. It was Nari, one of the human pilots. Are you okay? Yes, Taeyang said, surprised to find it was true. I was just thinking. Your species has changed us. Not our bodies or our technology, but our thinking, Nari smiled. Maybe, or maybe we just reminded you of something you forgot. Come on, I want to show you something. She led him to an observation deck. Outside, space stretched endlessly. No stars were visible. They were in a region between spiral arms where even starlight was rare. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it was peaceful. My grandmother told me a story, Nari said. Long ago on Earth, humans lived in caves. At night, they would sit around fires and tell stories. The darkness outside was full of predators. Lions, wolves, things that could kill them easily. But inside the circle of firelight, they were safe. And more than that, they were together. What is your point? Taiyang asked. My point is that darkness is not the enemy. Being alone in the dark is the enemy. But we are not alone. We have each other. We have our lights. And we have learned that most scary things become less scary when you face them with friends. Taiyang thought about this. You are saying that humanity's gift to the galaxy is not the beacons. No, Nari agreed. The beacons are just tools. Our real gift is showing you that you do not have to be afraid, and you do not have to be alone. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the dark. Meanwhile, Yuna and Minji were making a discovery that would change everything. Deep in a nebula hidden from normal sensors, they found something impossible. A structure. Massive. Ancient. Clearly artificial. Get Commodore Minho, Yuna said, her voice shaking with excitement. When the fleet arrived, they found themselves looking at ruins that predated any known civilization. The structure was a station of some kind, built on a scale that made their largest ships look like toys. And it was not empty. Inside they found data cores still functioning after millions of years. Minji worked for hours to access them. When she finally succeeded, the message that played was in a language no one knew, but the translation systems managed to decode it. We are the first ones, the message said. We built these stations as a gift to those who would come after. We learned too late that fear would keep species small, that darkness would become a prison. We tried to break free, but our fear was too strong. We failed. But we left these stations hoping that someday someone would succeed where we failed. To whoever finds this message, do not be afraid. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. Light the way for others. Be the torchbearers we could not become. The fleet stood in silence as the message ended. Then Ji-won started laughing. Not from humor, but from joy. They knew, she said. Millions of years ago, they knew. They tried to leave us a message. They wanted us to light up the galaxy. Minho looked at the ancient station. Then he looked at his crew. Humans and aliens standing together. All of them changed by their journey. All of them no longer afraid. Then let us not disappoint them, he said. Minji, can we restore this station? I think so, Minji said. And if we can use it as a template. These stations are more advanced than anything we have built. We could light up the entire galaxy. Sunho, who had insisted on joining this mission despite his fears, stepped forward. Then we should start now. We have waited millions of years already. It is time to stop living in darkness. And so the Great Illumination began, not just with beacons and technology, but with a change in how species thought about themselves and their place in the galaxy. The darkness was still there. It would always be there. But now it was filled with light and with friends who refused to let anyone face it alone. 2 years after first contact, the Lighthouse network spanned 40,000 star systems. Ships traveled freely through space that had been forbidden for millions of years. Species that once hid in fear now explored with wonder. Trade flourished. Art and culture spread between civilizations. The galaxy was alive in ways it had not been since the ancient times of the first ones. But there was still one place no one had reached. The Great Barrier. It was a region of space so dark that even the most powerful beacons seemed to fail. Sensors could not penetrate it. Probes sent into it never returned signals. It surrounded an entire section of the galaxy like a wall of absolute darkness. For millions of years, every species had simply accepted that some places could never be reached. Commodore Minho stood in the council chamber, presenting a proposal that many thought was insane. We need to go through the Great Barrier, he said. We need to find out what is on the other side. Elder Vix, who had supported humanity's efforts from the beginning, looked troubled. Commodore, we have accomplished much together. Why risk everything on this? The barrier has stood since before my species developed spaceflight. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. With respect, Elder, I disagree, Minho said. Every time someone has said that, humans proved them wrong. Our ancestors thought the ocean had edges and monsters. We sailed anyway and found new continents. We thought space was impossible to reach. We built rockets. We thought the dark zones were forever empty. We lit them up. The barrier is just the next horizon. It is also potentially the thing that kills us all, Captain Sunho said. But his tone was different now. Not angry or fearful, but concerned. Minho, I support most of your mad ideas, but this one troubles me. What if the barrier exists for a reason? What if something on the other side needs to stay isolated? Ambassador Daehyun, older now but still sharp, spoke carefully. Perhaps that is exactly why we need to go. If something is on the other side, they might be trapped just as we were trapped by our fear. They might need help. The debate lasted for days. Finally, a vote was held. The decision was close, but it passed. Humanity would lead an expedition through the Great Barrier, but because it might be a one-way trip, only volunteers would go. Thousands volunteered. Not just humans, but members of every species. The final fleet consisted of 100 ships, the largest expedition force ever assembled. Minho commanded it. Yuna, Minji, Jiwon, Taeyang, Nari, and Sunho all chose to join. Even Elder Vix surprised everyone by volunteering. I am 10,000 years old, he explained. I have lived in fear for all of them. I would like to see if there is something better on the other side before I die. The fleet gathered at the edge of the barrier. Behind them, the galaxy they knew glowed with thousands of beacons. Ahead was darkness so complete it seemed to absorb light itself. Minho gave the order and they entered. At first everything seemed normal. The ship stayed in formation. Communication remained clear, but as they went deeper, strange things began happening. Sensors showed contradictory readings. Time seemed to slow down and speed up randomly. Some crew members reported seeing things that were not there. Others felt emotions that made no sense. It is not just darkness, Yuna reported. It is something else. The barrier is not a physical thing. It is psychological. It is feeding on our fears. Then we stop being afraid, Minho said simply. All ships, this is Commodore Minho. I know many of you are experiencing fear right now. That is normal, but remember why we are here. Remember that we are not alone. Stay together, keep your lights on, and keep moving forward. His words helped, but the journey was still difficult. Ships began to separate, losing track of each other in the darkness. Communication became spotty. For 6 months, the galaxy heard nothing from the expedition. Many assumed they were lost. Then, a signal broke through. It was weak and distorted, but it was unmistakably Minho's voice. This is Commodore Minho to Galactic Council. We made it through. And you need to see this. The signal was followed by data, images, sensor readings. What they showed was impossible. Beyond the Great Barrier was not empty space. It was another galaxy, or rather a cluster of galaxies. Billions of civilizations living in their own network of lights. They had their own version of the Lighthouse Network, their own beacon stations, and they had been there all along, separated from Minho's galaxy not by distance but by fear. The barrier was not a wall. It was a mirror, a psychological barrier created by the collective fear of every species on both sides. Each side had been too afraid to cross it, so the darkness had grown stronger over millions of years, feeding on that fear until it became almost real. But humanity had not evolved with that fear. When they pushed through, the barrier weakened, and once it was crossed once, it could be crossed again. Within weeks, ships from both sides were making contact. The other civilizations were amazed. They had their own heroes who had lit up their own darkness. They had their own stories of overcoming fear, but they had never managed to break through the barrier. How did you do it? Asked the leader of the nearest civilization, a species called the Tarim who looked like floating crystals. We have tried for thousands of years. Jiwon, who had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the new galaxies, smiled. We had an advantage. We did not know it was supposed to be impossible, and by the time we learned it was, we had already decided it was just another dark room that needed a light. The celebration lasted for months. 2 galaxy clusters that had been isolated for millions of years were now connected. Trade, culture, knowledge, everything flowed between them. Humanity had not just lit up their own galaxy. They had shown the entire universe that darkness was not a prison. It was just the absence of light. Back on Earth, a ceremony was held. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered at the place where humanity had first looked up at the stars. A monument was unveiled. It was a simple flame, enclosed in crystal designed to burn for 1,000,000 years. The flame represented humanity's gift to the galaxy. Ambassador Daehyun, now very old and ready to retire, gave a speech. "We did not set out to change the galaxy," he said. "We just wanted to see what was out there. We wanted to explore. But in doing so, we learned something important. Light is not just about technology or beacons or science. Light is about refusing to let fear control you. Light is about curiosity being stronger than terror. Light is about reaching out into the dark and finding friends instead of monsters." He paused, looking at the assembled crowd. Humans and aliens standing together, species that once hid from each other now united. "The galaxy lived in darkness for millions of years," Dahyun continued. "Not because light did not exist, but because everyone was too afraid to turn it on. Humanity's only special quality was that we had already learned to live with darkness. We had already learned that the dark is just a place waiting for a light. And once you turn on that light, you realize you were never alone. Others were in the dark with you, just waiting for someone to be brave enough to light the first match." The crowd erupted in approval. The ceremony ended and the flame was left burning, a symbol that would last for ages. 50 years later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Lighthouse Network connected 3 galaxy clusters. Species that had been isolated for millions of years were now neighbors. The Void Devourers had become partners in exploration, helping map regions of space too dangerous for regular ships. And humanity, the species that had arrived with nothing but curiosity and courage, had become the galaxy's reminder that fear was a choice, not a destiny. On the newest exploration ship, a young cadet named Hyun stood at the observation deck. He was the grandson of Commander Yuna, carrying on his family's tradition of exploration. His instructor, a Vrethian who had learned to love the dark, asked him, "Cadet Hyun, we are about to enter an unexplored region. Are you afraid?" Hyun looked out at the darkness ahead. Then he smiled, the same smile his grandmother had worn when facing the unknown. "My grandmother told me that humans do not fear the dark. We just bring better lights. And if we run out of lights, we sit down, make a fire, and tell stories until morning." The instructor laughed, a sound that would have been impossible for a Vrethian 50 years ago. "Then let us go light another fire, cadet." The ship moved forward into the dark. But it was not really dark anymore. It was just space waiting to be explored. And behind them, stretching across 3 galaxies, billions of lights burned bright. Lights that would never go out. Lights that reminded everyone who saw them that the darkness was not forever. It never had been. It just took one small species, too curious and too stubborn to be properly afraid, to prove that the galaxy did not have to live in darkness. All it needed was for someone to ignite the light. And once that light was lit, it would spread forever, carried forward by every species brave enough to reach into the dark and add their own flame to the fire. The galaxy lived in darkness for millions of years. But humanity taught them a simple truth. Every darkness ends when someone decides to turn on the light. And every light, no matter how small, pushes back the dark a little more. Together, those lights could illuminate everything. The galaxy lived in darkness, but not anymore.